Yet another MadMongers. Dorothy is about to give us a presentation on Jenkins, but I'd like to put that on hold for just a second. Just a little bit of MadMongers business. We're always looking for people interested in giving talks. So if you have a talk that you would like to give, by all means let me know. We'll put you on the schedule. Likewise, if there's a talk that you are interested in hearing about, if there is a particular technology or module or just design pattern that you want to learn more about, let me know that too, and we'll find somebody to do a talk on that particular subject. So I'll be sitting in the back of the room enjoying my burger that just came out, but without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dorothy for Jenkins.
Thank you, Dorothy. Jenkins is my favorite friend. Yeah. Well, maybe not, but at any rate, he does keep me quite busy, and he also keeps some of my friends busy. We've got co-workers here that work with him. Actually, I've got a Jenkins Meister sitting in the back. And so I thought I would present a little bit about how Jenkins can help all of us. Perl is how all of us do a lot of our automation, but Jenkins can uber that up, ramp it up to another level. So, without further ado, take us on. Oh, Kazuki Kawaguchi is the person who created Hudson and Jenkins. That is the person in the middle there. And Hudson was the original name of the product. It was originally intended as a continuous integration application server for building Java applications. It was written in Java and Java server pages. It was written as competition to cruise control. I don't know if any of you have had any exposure to cruise control. Okay. Extensive configuration in XML files. Oodles, oodles, and oodles of XML, hand configured. At least it's the way it used to be when I worked on it many years ago. I don't know if it's gotten better.
I haven't used it for 6 years or so at least, so there's still XML. I mean, there's XML behind every CI tool, so yeah.
Well, at the time that I worked on it, there was no command, there was no GUI interface, there was no automated interface. It was you go in there and you manually play with the XML to configure it, and it was very big, long XML configuration. Hudson provides you with a lovely GUI. You touch a few buttons and it spits out the configuration. And that was like magic. Hudson was written as open source with an MIT license, whereas many of the other competitors to cruise control were very, very expensive enterprise tools. It was developed at Sun, which had a great reputation for sponsoring its employees, letting them do this type of work. Kazuki Kawaguchi, brilliant, very personable person, was the primary developer, still is the primary developer for this. They let him work on it as much as he wanted. When he wrote it so that it had a plug-in architecture from 2 points of view. One, the software itself is written with Java servlet pages, JSP, so that you can modify the base product itself fairly easily and customize it at your location. Two, you could write plugins, little modular plugins that you just dropped into a separate directory with a configuration file and pointed Hudson to it. And they just ran those plugins and did whatever they wanted. And you could write those plugins in any language you wanted. that made it wildly popular. So, unfortunately, a couple of years later, Oracle bought a lot of products from Sun, including Hudson. They trademarked the name, or wanted to trademark the name, and they wanted to commercialize the product, or a variant thereof. Now, by this time, a huge portion of the community, the open source community, had contributed massive amounts of code and personal time to this product. And they're like, you're going to commercialize our work that hundreds and hundreds of us had given to this product, and you're going to sell it back to us? No way. And Kazuki said, and he forked it, gave it a new name, and said, we're going to call this Jenkins now. By the way, Hudson came from the idea of the butler, Hudson's butler. So he said Jenkins is another popular name for a butler, just in case you're wondering where the names came from. This is also open source, and it's going to stay open source. It's a huge, I mean, just tremendous conflict on the open source community. To the point where for 2 years, Oracle had to fight this battle, and they eventually gave up and donated Hudson to the Eclipse Foundation. But by then the damage had been done. Hudson's name had been smeared through the mud. It's still a viable product. You can still use it. I'd still recommend, if you'd rather use the Hudson, if you have Hudson, use it. But there are far fewer commits to the code base in Eclipse. I mean, if you're dedicated to using things only that come through the Eclipse Foundation, get Hudson through Eclipse. Jenkins doesn't come through Eclipse. It has its own install.
Sorry, are you taking questions or
Sure,
not?
sure, go ahead.
Is there any feature difference between Hudson and Jenkins these
Yeah,
days or
Hudson-
not?
Hudson has far fewer commits. Not all of the plugins are being committed to the Hudson base. Not all of the future code will be compatible with Hudson. Most of the stuff that's being currently written is based towards Jenkins. Kazuki is still committing stuff backwards compatible to Hudson to a certain extent. But if you look at the list of commits out on the GitHub and out on the Eclipse Foundation, you'll see 20, 30 commits since January for Hudson, 20, 30 commits in the last month for Jenkins, maybe in the last week, I'm not sure, I wasn't going too far past the last page. And that's just to the base code software, not to the plugin on the Jenkins side. And most of the commits to the Hudson plugins are basically parallel ones. In other words, they commit them to Hudson, and then they go and make the same commit to Jenkins. But if they go make them to Jenkins, they may not bother to go back and put them in Hudson. So that's history, but it's one of the faces to know. Source code control systems. It comes out of the box with CVS, Subversion, and Git built into the package so that you run it and it can automatically check out your code to build your software packages, do whatever you need to do. From your GitHub, from your SVN. If you have another SCCS, there are a slew of SCCS plugins, and you can write your own. I know because my boss and I did. We wrote a variant of the Subversion plugin using JSP. And you see Visual Source Save, Force. There's lots of other ones. There's even a file-based version. So you can just keep archiving files them up and store them off somewhere. Lots of ways to keep your history, keep track of. Lots of ways to build. It's no longer just Java. It started out with Ant and Maven out of the box because it was Java. But of course Ant can do a lot more than Java. It has Xbuild and NAND, an archive, a Nexus plugins. And it will download and configure specific versions of these things for each build. You could say right out of the box, for each build, I want to download this version of Ant, this version of Java, this version of Maven for this build, and that version for that build. And it'll go download them, rebuild them, reload and reconfigure them each time. Or you can store them locally and have them in a local area and it'll go to retrieve them. And you just tell it where they are currently built. And you can have your own build tools, plenty of your own build tools, and just point to those build tools and tell them where they're located. Scripting. Everybody knows Bash, KSH, ZSH. I didn't write Tickle and KSH up there. Huh. WinBatch, PowerShell. Anybody do WinMT? Ruby's built in. You can write Ruby scripts right on the screen. The Bash support, you can write Bash scripts right on the screen. Which can be fun, and it will give you the error reports back. You can plug in any kind of scripts you want, and then call them Ruby, Python, Perl, whatever you want. And your plugins. I have some examples of some really nice PHP plugins that we can go and look at. There are some entire sites built around the PHP plugins for Jenkins, for building sites, building websites, doing PHP, code building, code testing. Let's see. For a code PHP site. Do the smoke testing. Go out and check, make sure that the database is valid. You can check your JavaScript and make sure that it's valid and formatted. It will give you a report on your JavaScript. You can even do your CSS formatting. You can have your C++ code checked and do your builds in here. And again, you could just add a language. You could run any of its plugins can be written in any language. And there are a whole bunch of plugins written specifically targeted to a lot of different languages, including Perl, for doing code builds, for doing code checking, for doing all the things you want to do with software. Installations, checking for, well, there's Code Simian. There's a Simian plugin for checking for duplicate code. Who wants to do the same thing again? DIY. Do not repeat yourself. Many faces of Jenkins have lots of APIs. The standard Jenkins interface is GUI. You come into the web, you see a nice little lots of drop downs and things, but you don't have to go that way. You could just use the web API and call it scripted, like a REST API, a SOAP API. Or you can go straight to the command line. It has a complete CLI library. And you can do it completely command line and bypass the web interface completely. And of course, you can always add plugins for sideways in.
So the Jenkins that we had at work, when you got to about this point, we were talking about the builds and deployments that Jenkins was doing,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you showed it, you could see the status. So it was dashboard, it was controller.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a.
Let's see if I can pull up my.
You've done a really good job of getting a lot of different information all on that front page.
Let's see if I have an example. Let me get out of here. Bear with me a moment. This is not my day job. Okay. I have Jenkins on here. Let me make sure it's started. There we go. This is my version installation of Jenkins. When you first create it, there are no jobs at all.
Can you blow it up a little?
Hmm?
Blow it up a little.
The text.
Text, it's a
So we
little
can see
small.
the text. Stephen?
A little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay. So creating a new job. Let's say we have freestyle job. Oops, has to have a name. This is with no plugins enabled, by the way. Okay. I have to allow my scripts. There we go. All right, I can give it a description. I can put HTML in my description in case I want to put something fancy in here. I can discard old builds, and then it tells me how many days do I want to keep the old builds. Or I could say how many builds do I want to keep. I want to keep the last 5 builds. And then how many artifacts do I want to keep?
What's an artifact?
An artifact would be anything that the build creates, like log files. It could be the test files, if you were running tests. It could be the zip files. It could be the jars if you were doing Java builds.
How's that different than a build? Isn't the jar the build?
That could be, yeah, but
Well, wouldn't the build itself be like the distributable piece?
yeah.
Whereas the artifacts are the in-between pieces.
Oh, I'd have to look at
I
it.
think that's what they're referring to.
let's see, artifacts and builds, but
Well, artifacts typically in the CI world are, like she said, anything you designate as an artifact. It can be test results, it can be a deployable artifact, it can be results on any other type of reporting that you want to do. It's all of those things. Any one of those you want to pick and choose for.
history, you could have, it takes a little while to work out what those details are, and
Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack you.
that's quite all right, that's quite all right, it's a perfectly good question. Perfectly reasonable, and it takes a little bit of working through each of those details. You can add parameters to the build. You can say a Boolean parameter of, let's say, value.
Sorry, my eyesight's not good. What did you type?
Jump through hoops.
Jump through hoops. Okay.
Kind of.
Let's see, we're going to add another parameter. We're going to add a choice parameter. We're going to call this my choices. We're going to call them beer, wine, and rum. And we're going to say, let's see, advanced project options. You can use a custom workspace. By default, Jenkins puts all of the workspaces for the builds underneath of its own, like var user Jenkins, so it creates a workspace area. Then you can say that for this particular job, I want my workspace to be somewhere else. So I want the directory to be in desktop. And then I can add a build step, which is execute shell, type in a batch command, directory listing, or no, echo. List all the variable names. These are your basic variables that are available to all scripts. And you have a build number that's available, your build ID, your display name, your job name, all types of different information, your SVN revision, your SVN URL, where you got your code from. All of these are available to you to type into here. Now this won't be valid since I'm not getting it from SVN, but it's something I could put in here if I wanted to. Now that's a build step. Now at the end, after it's finished either successfully or not successfully building, I can have a post-build step, such as email notification. And I can send a separate email to every individual who broke the build. There are plugins to, there are actual plugins to aim a Nerf gun at the person who broke the build. You know, an automated Nerf gun.
What?
I've seen them at work, and you can, there are videos online.
So, are there like multiple Nerf guns that you could have? So one of them has like actual darts, just
Yes,
in case
yes.
it's really bad?
There's a video of it's called Who Broke the Build? And you see this mobile Nerf gun, and it activates.
That's hilarious.
I have my helmet on every day.
And yes,
Are they
you see this
building?
guy ducking
Oh my
and diving under his desk. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Apply. Saved. Dashboard. Why is it doing this to me? Did I do something wrong? Did I not save? I didn't save something.
I think that was a bug recently they fixed
Oh,
in the newer version.
this is the LTS version.
Yeah.
Go figure. Usually the LTS versions don't have bugs like this.
You could just bring up a new tab with the main, right? Oh, just
Okay,
Yeah, it's-
there we go. So now, if I were to run this job and it would actually have something in it that could work, this would turn green if it worked and red if it failed.
well, you can run it, right? Can't you? I mean, all you said was echo, right?
Oh, that's true. That's true. So let's try running it.
Well,
we want to see
I mean,
failure.
Okay,
Where's that
says,
Nerf
it
gun?
says it requires parameters.
Oh, yeah.
So I have to choose, do I want beer, wine, or rum?
Rum.
Okay, rum it is. Do I want to jump through hoops?
No, not with rum.
Not with rum. Okay, consensus, jump through hoops or not? No. No. Oh, my bolt didn't work.
No, it's right. No, it's right.
All right, so now let's take a, now you notice down at the bottom it has this last build was 6.16 seconds ago. So I can edit the description here. Let's put, somebody want to help me with my HTML?
I think
is
it's,
valid.
It's
yeah,
got
B
to
is
be
valid.
valid.
I think it's just,
preview.
it's, you need to unescape it or something. I don't know.
Use brackets instead of
Oh.
Yeah, try that.
because it's like BB code.
Ooh, I have a terrible mouse. It's always.
No, maybe
No,
not.
it didn't work either.
Oh, well.
Eh.
So at any rate, it says, now notice it says the last failed build was at the same time. An unsuccessful build, because you can differentiate between them if you want to. Now you can delete the
The
project.
build failed and it was unsuccessful.
Now you notice though on the left now I have a build history. So let's go back to the dashboard. The dashboard up here only shows one.
Thunderclouds.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna go back here. I'm gonna run it again. Now this time I'm gonna choose beer and jump through hoops. Now notice it says the last build was 40 milliseconds ago. But now look at the build history. It's got 2 on the left. If I go to the dashboard, it only shows the 1. The most recent.
So this is what my first introduction at work was, just to see a page with long
Yeah, you-
screens full of build jobs, and in various stages of red and green and sunny and cloudy.
Mm-hmm.
So, for 2 or 3 jobs, probably, any way that people have been building through time is fine, but for managing, dozens and hundreds, it was pretty nice to see.
Yeah, in the instance that we have at our office, we have, how many boards in the board farm?
Close to 40.
And how many variations on the tests?
There's some operating systems that have hundreds of different variations, so.
Okay, so each board can have, you know, many different operating systems on it, different ports on them that need to be tested. And so he has the whole sequence of those variations on here.
Well, yeah, and there's a dashboard plugin you can use that just shows red and green bars, and that's it. To get rid of.
Yep, and he also has them organized by, I think you have them organized by operating system
Yeah, general project.
and different projects. So you can slice and dice. Up here, this button, you can add new groups, which are views where you can section up your groups of jobs. And you can give regexes to sort them out by their names or by parameters within the jobs, or you can just hand pick which jobs go in here. Now, in addition to having the jobs look like this where it's generating a view, it also has a dashboard configuration where the HTML does work. And it gives you a portlet type of thing where you could say, on this particular view, I want to see several portlets. And this portlet is going to show me, for my build, the subversion history, the JIRA bug report, the actual build, the current logs, and you can see it all on one build, you know, all on one page as different portlets for a particular job. And then you click up at the top, change which job it is, and all the portlets change. That was what I did for a different company. So there are different ways of approaching, many, many different ways of approaching this. Let's see if we can get out to Jenkins. See if I can get it connected to the internet. Meantime, it's looking good now. Once your build is completed, you can be notified by email. I think I showed you the email notification. If you want something a little more in your face than email, but a little less in your face than the Nerf gun, you can get an RSS feed. You can get a little system tray icon, and a little Jenkins will appear up on the side of your browser and say, your job is done.
So what's a lava lamp? What does it do with a lava lamp?
It'll actually make the lava lamp bubble.
Okay, so it's not that exciting.
So you have a green one and a red one somewhere on the room where you.
Yeah.
The red one bubble.
Red one starts to go.
Yeah, that means your server's down. You know, okay, that means production server's down when the red lava lamp goes.
You're fired.
Yeah.
Pink slip comes flying across the room.
It's the pink lava lamp.
Okay, why is that? All
So
right.
that you replace most of the builds are happening at the off hours.
And of course, there's Jabber notifications, so if you've got instant messenger, you can have it just come up, pop up, and I'll pay you, this particular job is finished.
Just a bunch of information.
Just a bunch
Well,
of information.
or you could write your own plugin.
they run so long, or why not like during the day?
See, I think we talked about the dashboards, and I showed you the parameter lists that can drop down. So all of the plugins have the ability to have those parameters added to them, so that you can parameterize anything. Not just the jobs, but any of the plugins. And you can add any of the environment variables.
Now that's my favorite page.
Oh, yes. When I was at Zappos, what we used Jenkins for most was automated testing. We put Selenium through its paces. We had lots of slave machines that ran lots of different types of browsers. So we would have Firefox browsers and Chrome browsers and IE and Opera and Safari running through the store, placing mock orders through the QA site, ordering lots and lots of shirts, different varieties. You never saw so many Uggs ordered.
You do load testing too?
Yes, you can do load testing because with Jenkins and with slaves and VMs, because it can build as many VMs as you want and as many slaves as you want, you can just bang away and just generate as much as you want and just really, and you can run JMeter on it too, and JMeter can really leverage some pretty heavy load testing stuff. And then you get some really nice reports at the end telling you what failed, what didn't. And then I used it for ping testing when we were hooking up with another company, and they had to open their firewall, and they would change which ports their firewalls had open at various times. So we set up, actually I believe it was Postgres, to check and ping test the ports, the firewall ports, and a couple of other things, the telnet ports and the SSH ports, because they had different configurations through the firewall, or path through the firewall, and the database ports. And then give records over time to them as to how often they were doing this to us. So that we could go in at the end of a week or two and give them a report and say, you guys nailed us during our QA period this many times and slowed down our QA. This is why we're giving you a request to lock down these ports, even though it's against your policies.
So in other words, the test would start running and then you wouldn't finish before the time frame was over, so they switched to another port, therefore your...
Our QA tests would fail, and they would fail for what appeared to be no reason, and they would say, oh, it's your software. Your software is wrong. Because we were in the middle of QA, we were developing the software. And they would say, no, it's your software, it's not our ports, it's not our computers, it's your software. And so we were able to nail it down and say, that time it was your, at that time our stuff crashed and we were able to nail it down to your firewall. And that time it crashed and it was your firewall. And that time it crashed and it was your firewall. That time it crashed and it was your firewall.
Maybe like Amazon bought out Zappos.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what my job was.
You can't say it, maybe. That's your job.
That was my job. So that was, like the smoke testing, is your remote server up? Jenkins can sit there and be checking that, and you saw that red-green light? It's not only telling you red-green is it up, which means that you can just look at that and see red-green, it's up, it's not. But you can also then look behind it and see a history. How long has it been up? When has it been down? How often has it been down and for how long? it's really been not just continuous integration, but continuous testing. It's been a real star. I really loved being able to link everything together in one place. Whether if you have a wiki, that's real nice, but Jenkins is a dynamic place that actually built all the links for you continuously. So you could link to a problem in Jira, to the build in Maven, to the artifacts, to the source code control, to where you deployed it, to your test results, to your actual logs. So I actually have a log table, a log viewer that we built in Perl that allowed the QA people to look at the current logs, and it looked like what is that expensive log viewer?
Splunk.
Splunk, yes. This was a cheap Splunk. And it was all in one dashboard. And you chose, we had dozens of applications. You picked the application and the dashboard changed, but it showed you all of these different things, all of these different connections for that application. And you could pick all of the different bugs in Jira for that application. And it would show you, for a given bug, the different builds that were applied to that bug, and then which deployments had gone for that build.
Cool.
Very powerful. QA team loved it. Managers loved it.
When you say you link to the problem in Jira, what does that mean exactly?
Jira was where we, yes, bug tracking.
Right.
Yes, and so you could record either a definition of something you wanted to create a new feature, or the QA people could say, this is a bug, we need to fix it. And from then on, until it was fixed, every action that occurred on that had to be noted in Jira. The developers had to say, we did this in Jira, and record it. So
in other words, when they made a change for that issue, that commit would be tied to Jira.
that commit actually had the Jira ticket typed into it, the commit.
Okay, so when Jenkins runs and it builds, it's got that tag
That's
somewhere
right.
in there.
Yeah, and Jenkins can generate the URL to link to that Jira ticket.
Yeah.
So
Jen-
If it's
Jen-
in whatever format it needs
Right.
to be in.
Yeah,
in the commit, yeah.
That's right. That's right. And basically Jenkins did, we had a Perl script that did a smart regex through the SACS log, and then looked up the Jira tag, which was a required thing. And if it didn't have a Jira tag, then Jenkins threw a message, an Instagram.
Okay. Because you built it that way to.
That's right.
Okay. Great.
And yeah, we could even stop it from deploying unless it had all the proper stuff.
Cool. Like that.
That got me some nasty grams back. Okay. Well, I was talking about Jenkins can have slaves. Maybe politically correct term is children. But that means that can be looked at from different points of views. Jenkins can run other Jenkins, either on the same machine or on other machines. So you can have a Jenkins on your machine, and your machine, and your machine, and this Jenkins is the master machine telling the other Jenkins to run its jobs and getting reports back and then aggregating them so that you have a central place for the aggregate results. Or Jenkins can simply send an SCP command to those machines. They don't have to have Jenkins running on them. They just have to have the ability to connect via SCP, SSH, and accept that command, run it, and it will parse through the results and report back. Keep all those results. That is the artifact, is the SSH run. Jenkins there's a bunch of plugins for various different VM types. So as Jenkins can run a VM, Jenkins can create a VM.
Can Jenkins, sorry,
Go ahead.
asking a question about the mouthful though. Can Jenkins spin up a VM and then make it a slave right away?
Yes. Can't tell you right how right now, or how successfully right now. That's another issue. Jenkins is volatile. It's open source code, and it's in very active development all the time. And this is one of the issues that we've run across. Once you get a stable configuration of Jenkins and the plugins that work for you, snapshot it, make it golden, have a second machine that you're going to try out the next iteration of Jenkins or the next new plugin, because Java code and JSP pages are volatile by themselves, so any changes can change the memory heap, can cause memory issues, can cause all kinds of nasties, and then when you throw more languages in on top of that and code from hundreds of different people on top of that, once in a while some bugs get in there and old things that worked stop working.
So the first thing you need is an Uber Jenkins to manage the master Jenkins, the stable version, and the master Jenkins that you want to be.
Well, Jenkins is probably being built with Jenkins, so.
That's
yeah.
right. And one of the things that our Jenkins Meister has done is uses Jenkins to back itself up and keep it in its configuration in source code control.
Including all the history?
As much as you want to.
Okay.
It does teach you good habits. Over time, it tracks. This is what I've said over and over again. Statuses over time. It will automatically compress things if you ask it to. It can also store them off-site. You don't want to keep them building up and building up on your local disk. Tell it to SCP them off somewhere else and then delete them from the local space. Well, you saw it asking me what I wanted to do with the artifacts, so I won't go over that. Let's see. I'm afraid I will not be able to go to these examples, but I will be putting these out on the web for you. I'm on Tumblr, Software Engineer, Dorothy Valiga, Valiga. And basically the Jenkins PHP org is a really nice example of Jenkins being used to manage a PHP site. And then this is a nice way of searching through Google to find a bunch of public uses of Jenkins throughout the world.
So those are all like other people's Jenkins dashboards that you can find that are public?
That are publicly visible.
Why would you do that?
Well, it might be an open source.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of these are open source.
It's also worth noting you can have authentication, so
Yeah,
you have
sure.
anonymous.
So you can't just
access rights.
kick off other people's.
Yeah. I want to take 100 saves.
Yeah.
JDOS.
Oh, by the way, Jenkins is ridiculously easy to install. You can install it on Windows, Linux, Macintosh. You download a jar file, and you just run java-jar.
Well, yeah, it's even easier than that though. You can find MSIs or RPMs or
That's
different
right, that's
packages.
right.
Yeah.
Or VMs,
There
from
are,
Vietnami.
you can install,
Maybe. I don't know. I
Yeah,
haven't heard of
you
that one.
yeah, that's right.
I didn't do it, but my colleague did.
That's right. Sudo, apt-get, install Jenkins, and you've got it. And the next thing you do is you browse to your local host 8080, because you now have the web server. And you have what you saw on my machine.
Cool. I have two questions.
Yes.
Can you change, Jenkins URL, there it is right there. Okay, that answers one.
Yeah, you can change it. Yes.
If you don't
can.
like 8080, you can. But, the other question is what's the minimum Java version that's needed to run Jenkins? I mean, can you use Java 6? Do you have to use Java 7? I think 8 is out now, or?
I don't know that it's tied to a particular version right now.
Okay.
It's
We can
Java
check on
5.
Jenkins CI when I'm back
Okay.
online.
Cool, thank you.
Mhm.
And you can change the port to whatever you want, by the way.
Yes, you
If
can
that's
change
what
whatever
your
port you
question.
want, yeah.
Not
Yep.
the whole URL, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
we ran it under Tomcat, in a Tomcat server, in many places that I've worked, and also on Windows premises, Winstone server. Yes.
So is the O'Reilly book still a decent buy then for Jenkins?
You can also, there's also a free one that you can download. I think, who printed this one out?
We never did find out who printed it, but it was sitting by the printer, so I brought it.
I'm not sure if this is the free one or not, but there is
Yes.
one very much like this that's a free one that you can download.
Does it have a URL or anything on it?
Probably.
And
Looks like
And the
Google
Jenkins
URL.
And then-
something.
again.
you can basically
I have no
download
desire to have this stack of paper.
well, you can download it in PDF form. I have it on my cell phone. There's a couple of very nice Jenkins PDFs out there. Kosuke wrote several very nice ones, including 10 Studies to Tuning Jenkins. CloudBees, by the way, is where he is working now. CloudBees.com is a services in the cloud type of company. They specialize in Jenkins as a service in the cloud. And they will provide you with information about Jenkins for free, and then try to talk you into buying their services on top of that. Yes?
Novice question, I guess, but if I have, say, Git installed on a local machine where I've got a local code base and I'm making changes to for a website on a remote server, Jenkins is installed on the remote server. So how does it know? I guess when I change my local code base and I push that up, I'm assuming I push that to the remote server, and then Jenkins is on the remote server monitoring
Yes,
that code base, and as soon as that code base changes, and it can be configured to run through.
that's right.
Okay.
There's like a triggers in Jenkins that like you would set up a trigger to say look for changes in Git, and
Okay.
as soon as you push something and it detects it, it'll do whatever you want it to do with that.
Okay.
So the typical use here is something where, somebody makes a commit, and then Jenkins says, oh, there's a commit, and then it runs and it builds, and it says, you screwed up or everything's fine, right? That's like the typical situation.
That's the continuous integration situation.
Right.
The other place where it's used is for a replacement for cron, where you take your cron jobs and instead of having them in cron, you put them in here and use this as a GUI replacement for cron.
With like some window dressing and
That's right.
checkings and stuff, all that stuff around it.
Yeah, you can put parameters around it, and basically now it's keeping a history of your cron jobs, it's keeping artifacts from your cron jobs, it's keeping a track of every time that your cron job has run, whether it ran, whether it failed, what it output, whatever you want to, whatever information you want to collect.
And on all the different machines that they might need to run on, which,
Yes.
you know, back when Cron was first getting going, it was mostly considered to be one or a few machines, not, you know, 1,000 different VMs that have proliferated in the office. So.
Now, you can't use it for something that has to be run at exactly 101, because Jenkins isn't designed for that granular of a time. I mean, you'll tell it 101, but it'll go, well, if I run at 102, it should be okay because I'll get around to it because I'm in Java, and Java's memory just didn't get around to saying it was 101 until it was 102. So then you want to make it a cron job. But if you have that kind of flexibility with your cron, you know, because you just want to have it run once an hour, or about 1 or 2 minutes after the hour, then this is really nice for keeping track of things. And a whole lot easier to handle because it will even give you the syntax for the cron.
And cruise control, by the way, which is the very out-of-date great granddaddy to Jenkins, was basically set up as a replacement to cron anyway, so.
Really?
Wow. I mean, that was in 1999 or something like that, but yeah.
So you brought up a good point about memory utilization, and at where I work, we looked at getting Jenkins mainstream into our processes probably about 5-6 years ago, where and our first experience with that was it just wouldn't handle. We were either doing something really wrong, or it wouldn't handle the amount of load that we were trying to throw at it. So we'd have to spawn up multiple masters in front of an Apache instance, load balanced and whatnot, and then it had things like the build executors per slave could only be X number, and they couldn't really change dynamically at that point, I guess. So, and most Jenkins or Hudson was what it was then. You would just throw up every, couple of hours without a memory errors.
Yep.
Just pretty common with Java, and we had to have actually a cron job to look to see if whether Hudson was up and running and restart it if needed.
Yep.
Now there's irony.
Yep.
I'm interested in getting a general feel on what your experience has been with respect to scalability and performance for like a large number of loads. And
I ran 15 machines with many apps in each one, and that I was running with a single Jenkins, running all the test stuff on them. What I would do is keep Jenkins inside of a Tomcat container, and then I could tune Tomcat. It was much easier to tune Tomcat than to tune Jenkins.
I would agree with that. Yep. And that's actually how we had it running within a JBoss container, which is Tomcat as well.
Yeah,
so
same thing.
I was.
And and also I with the same thing. I did the same thing. I set up monitors to watch the Tomcat.
Right. So I mean, have things improved? I know there's been.
Yes, it has gotten better, but you still have to watch it. Again, with each variation of what you're trying to do, and each plugin that you add, or change, or update that comes down the road that you apply thinking it's not changing anything, you have to revisit the situation.
Well, that brings up a kind of a follow-up question I have. I haven't worked with Jenkins in like a year or so, but I used to a lot. But do you know if so say you have like multiple slaves, and one slave picks up a job and it dies from a memory dump or something, whatever, it dies for whatever reason, like midway, would the other slave be able to kind of pick up and resume that job or not?
It depends on how you've written your jobs.
Yeah.
I've got a case by case basis.
There's a plugin for retrying a job
Okay.
based on how it failed. So
Okay.
You could do that.
Okay.
Jordan, I don't know if you could answer maybe Mithin's question as well about the scale of how many we're running.
Yeah, we have not like 15 like you were working with. We're like 10 slaves right now, growing. But we kick off probably about 150 jobs at the same time at night. A massive queue and just churns through. So
Is that how many executors on each slave?
I think we have at one point I had like 250 total.
Okay.
So
So you got 250 simultaneous builds running.
yeah.
Yeah.
And most of them are just bash scripts, and, some telnet stuff.
So a lot of it is going to depend on the underlying technology of the plugins that you're using too. You know,
Right.
if you're running bash scripts, you're going to use this much. If you're going to be running, Selenium and JavaScript and JUnit and JMeter, you're going to be using this much.
Right, and we found the same thing was the more number of plugins we threw into the mix. Sure, it made things look pretty and managers happy, but it didn't. It didn't keep things stable.
Well, I actually solved that problem by having a pretty Jenkins and a functional Jenkins. And
So
yeah.
right, so I guess
I mean,
yeah.
That's right.
and there's basic, like the default memory size for the JVM is always crap, so there's
Right,
tweaking you
of
can
course,
do to,
yeah.
And since Jenkins is so cheap to spin up, it makes sense to be able to have a pretty Jenkins and a functional Jenkins and slaves around. It's a little bit more administration, but if it keeps people happy, keep the customer happy. Got different. Well, that basically what you're coming down to is you have different levels of customers. You have customers who need a different level of interface to work with, and so you need to install Jenkins different ways to deal with a different level of customers.
Right.
That, I guess, leads to another question. Do you have a sense of like the demographic of Jenkins users as far as like, I know obviously a lot of like open source projects use it, but like open source, like smaller startup kind of places versus enterprise level uses of Jenkins. Do you have any idea like if
I use it for
Oracle
my
is using Hudson, for example, some stuff like that,
I have, Red Hat uses Oracle. Red Hat uses Jenkins. Amazon uses Jenkins. I use Jenkins at home.
So it goes up across the board. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good? We're done?
We're done. Thank you very much.
I was able to find that book on itebooks.info,
Oh, good.
so, and it's downloadable there. PDF.
Excellent.
22 mix.
So as I mentioned at the top of the show, we are always looking for additional speakers. Next month, Dave will be giving a talk on inline modules, inline Perl modules. So basically, that allows you to build a module inside of a Perl script without having to create a separate PM file, that sort of thing. And
Also,
he'll
like,
what's that?
not the inline CPAN module, but inline.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Skipping CPAN.
So anyway, that can be very useful for self-contained programs that you want to distribute, things like that. Anyway, so Dave will be giving the talk on that. We don't yet have a talk for July. I'm sorry, are you waving?
No, I can wait. I wanted to bring up a topic that I was hoping somebody would give a talk on, or somebody who had experience with it. But
Okay.
we can.
No, go for it.
Well, packaging Perl programs as self-contained. which is sort of in. So differences between like fat packer or PAR, PP, and if you want to just ship somebody an EXE or an executable and
Right. Okay.
say run it. and
Yeah,
then-
well, I will ask around and see if we can get somebody to do a talk on Fat Packer and what. I'm sorry.
Get Graham down here.
Yeah. We're gonna fly in Graham from the East Coast. No. Although maybe he'll be here because it is summer. He usually visits his family during the summer, so maybe he'll just happen to be here
That'd be
one
cool.
of these months. Anyway, so yeah, we'll see what we can do about getting you a talk on Fat Packer and some of the other. There's also Pearl to EXT from Active State.
Right.
So we'll see what we can do about getting a talk on packing up Pearl as a distributable executable. Anyway, if there are other talks that everybody wants to hear or anybody wants to hear, please let me know and we'll find somebody to give a talk on that, or I'll give a talk on it, one way or the other. So anyway, next month again, inline modules, and if you have a talk that you want to hear or you want to give, come talk to me or email me jt@plainblack.com. Thanks for coming, and let's give a round of applause for the